Let's get to this week's Economy Matters with Christoph Schumacher beaming in from Germany this week. Thanks for joining us, Christoph. So, you've been pondering New Zealand's debt levels.
Absolutely, because just before I left, the headlines were all about New Zealand reaching now record high debt levels, and we are spending even more than expected, so more than was budgeted for. And at the same time, income is lower as a result of the slightly slowing down economy.
And where does Aristotle come into this?
Well, if you look where the term economics comes from, it actually originated in ancient Greece and means manager of the household. And Aristotle was actually the first who wrote about this and explained to us that we should run an economy like a household where we need to ensure people have food and shelter, that have access to education, healthcare, at the same time can spend time with friends and enjoy the arts. So this is sort of the overall picture of how governments should run economies. But then, of course, there needs to be income to pay for it all, and that's where the problem is at the moment with New Zealand.
Yeah, so what are your concerns there? And is our economy being mismanaged?
Um, Putting it into a global perspective, no. New Zealand is actually doing relatively well. Debt level is about 57, 58% of our GDP. That it's low compared to international standards. I mean, I'm now in Germany, and Germany is normally considered being quite careful and good with money. And even here, debt level is about 70% of GDP. And if we look into the States, it's 144%. So anything below 100% debt level compared to GDP is considered good, and New Zealand sits in the lower part. So overall, I don't think we could say that our economy is mismanaged.
So, are we flourishing as a nation then on the Aristotle Wellbeing and Happiness Index?
Probably not. We have a well-being budget, so that's a good thing. But as I mentioned, we are currently spending more than we could or should, and we are earning a bit less. So the government needs to take a closer look at how it is spending the money we have, because creating deficits is never a good thing. I mean, you wouldn't be happy if your income drops and you're spending more at home. So given that we should manage economies like households, we can't be happy about the current situation.
There have been shocks, though. I'm thinking COVID as well as this year's cyclone that is forcing the government to spend more.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why I'm not actually really concerned. I wouldn't talk about any form of mismanagement. There were extreme circumstances, which we all knew cost a lot of money and extra money. But looking ahead, now that the economy is sort of slowing down a bit, we just need to be a bit more careful in the way we spend money.
What can we learn from the Greeks then? They've been through financial troubles in the past decade or so.
Probably the best thing we can learn is how not to do things, right? Ancient Greek was flourishing, but more recent Greek is not, because they had a big upset where they were facing bankruptcies, needed bailouts. But the lesson still is, don't spend, as simple as it sounds, don't spend more than you actually earn.
And what about comparing New Zealand with the likes of Australia in terms of debt?
But we are still better than the Australians. Our debt level is lower than Australia. So, as I've said, in an international context, we are actually doing well. And New Zealand always has been quite careful and being careful with not building up too much debt.
What about where you are right now in Germany?
Germany sits at around 75, 76% of GDP, so still worse than New Zealand. So big message here is, yes, never a good thing to increase your debt levels, but overall New Zealand is still doing okay.
And in terms of where the economy is heading, we're expecting sluggish growth, slightly negative, slightly positive quarters of growth to come. What does that mean in terms of debt?
It'll probably suggest that debt levels will increase even further. That's where the warning has to come in, of making sure the money we can spend is spent in the best possible way and not wasted in any sorts of way. And that's also currently a big debate. Of course, in an election year, there are always differing opinions, and how should we spend? Can we spend it more efficiently, and so on. So it's a very current topic at the moment.
And that's just not government debt, that's also household debt as well, with rising mortgage costs.
Absolutely. Now, this is a far more worrying sign is that household debt levels in New Zealand are actually well above average. We're sitting about probably 116% of household debt per disposable income. Now, that is not good. We are sitting way above the likes of Germany, Australia, and even Greece. But this is a result of our increasing cost of living, the unaffordability of housing. People were forced to borrow more than they actually wanted to, and with an increase in OCR, that creates extra stress. So I believe that's where New Zealand has to be careful that household debt levels are not increasing any further, because we're already pretty much right up there where we don't want to be.
Christoph Schumacher, thanks for your time.
You're welcome.